A common frustration that a lot of people face when using AI coding assistance is when it rushes into execution without fully understanding the scope of what you're trying to get done. For example, if you want to add a user authentication to your app, your first instinct might be to ask Cline, add an authentication logic to my app. However, behind this simple prompt, there are a lot of assumed details like what authentication provider you want to use, what routes in the page you want protected under authentication, how to handle session persistent, and whether you want role-based access for different types of users. As you can see, there are important details that would completely change how the solution will look depending on these requirements. So having to backtrack to fix implementation that wasn't identified at the initial prompt not only ends up costing more money, but more importantly, costing you more time. For this reason, Cline carved out a unique philosophical decision to incorporate the plan and act mode. Let's start by understanding the plan mode. When you're in plan mode, Cline deliberately holds off on executing any task. Instead, Cline will gather as much context as possible. While Cline is engaged in plan mode, it will strategize with you to devise an optimal plan for what you are trying to get done. For example, when you are in plan mode, you can say, add an authentication to my app, just like earlier. But instead of jumping into executing your request, Cline will engage in a series of interaction with you and your codebase to gather details about how the authentication should look like on your app. In order to load proper context, Cline might engage in agentic exploration where it will search and read relevant files in your codebase. In this case, Cline will read through files that are related to authentication flows if it exists. And depending on what Cline finds, it might ask you for details related to authentication methods, like what routes you want protected, how you want to handle sessions, and what kind of authentication services you would like to use. And when enough detail is provided, Cline will draft an execution plan for you to review and ask to switch to act mode, where Cline will then carry out the execution based on the plan. One important distinction between Cline's plan mode and Cline's deep planning, which is a similar feature to the plan mode. But deep planning happens under the hood as a way for Cline to manage and extend its own internal context by persisting reasoning across chains. Plan mode, on the other hand, is a collaboration layer where you and Cline find alignment on what you need to get done. Plan mode is designed to give you control over the scope of work that you're trying to get done. Act mode is when Cline shifts from planning to execution. And at this stage, it will take the reviewed plan and begin carrying out the actual changes in your codebase. It could be anything from writing new files, modifying existing files, running terminal commands, using MCP, or running browser tools. Since you started from plan mode, each action that Cline makes in act mode is grounded in the proper context and requirements gathered during plan mode.